Thanks so much for joining us for the Wyoming Arts Summit. What a great first session to kick off the day. For those of you I don't know, my name is Michael Lang, and I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Arts Council, and I use he, him pronouns. I am a white male with short, white and gray hair sitting in my office at my house with a tan colored back wall against a high brown chair. Our next session I think is going to be really great. You know, we're focusing on advocacy. How can you help advocate on behalf of the programs and services you offer to communities, both at a local, regional, and national level? Our next session is actually co-sponsored and hosted by the Wyoming Arts Alliance, and includes arts advocacy leaders from across the West, as well as we're excited to have someone with us from the Wyoming Community Foundation today as well. So the title of our session for the next hour is Grassroots Advocacy from a Single Seed. And we're really fortunate to have with us today, helping moderate our session, Erin Taylor. Erin Taylor is the owner of Taylor Strategies, but has been a longtime arts supporter and arts advocate, has served on the Wyoming Arts Council board for about 6 years before she started working with the Wyoming Arts Alliance and the Western States Arts Federation as a lobbyist on behalf of arts at the state level. So Erin, I'd love to hand it over to you to kick off our next session.
Awesome, thank you for that, Michael. So nice to be here today and see some familiar faces and folks that I've just worked with for so many years. So I'm really pleased to be here. For those of you, I identify with she, her, and I am, I'm going to say I'm just a middle-aged white person because I'm approaching my 50th birthday. So I'm not sure how I'm feeling about that, saying that out loud. With shoulder length dark hair, and I'm sitting in my office with a lot of colorful books behind me and some plants, and so there's just a lot of color behind me. So I'm just really pleased to be here, and it's my honor to visit with you a little bit about what advocacy looks like and what that looks like here in Wyoming, and maybe what we can learn from what's happening elsewhere. And so what I thought I would do to help kind of kick us off a little bit is I'm going to ask our panelists to say a little bit about themselves. And I am going to ask you, I'm going to give you a heads up right now because I didn't tell you what this question was going to be, but I'm going to ask you to share what your kind of your greatest lesson coming out of the last 18 months has been in terms of the pandemic, and how challenged we were, and maybe what new opportunities we had for us. So I'll go ahead and answer that. I will say that for my family, I am married. I have 3 children, 2 dogs who I hope you don't hear today, but you might. And as you heard from Michael, I am an advocate. I do lobby for the arts and some other clients in Wyoming, so I'm very busy. And what I learned out of the pandemic was that sometimes it's nice to really slow down. And whether we knew it or not, the pandemic was a really nice way to force us to make some other decisions. And so I am really pleased with that, because some of those lessons my family and I have actually kept with. And we didn't quite jump all the way back into the way things used to be. So I'm really pleased about that. So that is my COVID lesson. I'm pleased to introduce to you today, I've got David Holland here with WESTAF, which stands for Western States Arts Federation. Did I get that right? Okay. And we also have Becca Smith with us here today, and she is with the Wyoming Community Foundation and the Wyoming Women's Foundation. So I'm going to go ahead and Becca, I'm going to go ahead and let you start first and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do at the Community Foundation, and tell us your COVID blessing.
Okay, so I'm Becca Smith, and I'm the director of the Wyoming Women's Foundation, which is a priority fund of the Wyoming Community Foundation. And I know that I'm not on your program for today, but I'm standing in for Micah Richardson, who couldn't be here at the last minute, and she's my colleague here at the Wyoming Community Foundation. I use the she and her pronouns, and my background is I have some women, antique picture of women skiing in the background, and I have a cowgirl hat that's pink, and a couple of other little pieces of art behind me, and a big brown desk. I am wearing glasses. I am approaching middle age, and a white woman, and I'm wearing a big thick sweater because it's a chilly day out there. And then my lesson from the pandemic has, I think, just been the value of being able to connect with people digitally like this. It's been really actually kind of the best part of it for me, because we do work statewide. And so it's just made it so much more convenient to be able to talk to people across the state. And of course, it's no substitute for seeing you all in person, but it's really a great second, choice. So I appreciate being able to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Becca. David, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Erin. So my name is David Holland. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his. I am the deputy director at WestF. I'm a brown-skinned man. I identify as African American. I have closely cropped, nearly bald hair. I'm clean shaven, and I have on a navy blue shirt, and the background behind me is blurred. And in terms of what I learned from the pandemic, I feel that I learned that individually and collectively, as communities and as groups, that we are incredibly resilient, and when responding to a crisis can achieve pretty tremendous, monumental, and amazing things. And I think that certainly has been the case in the arts and cultural sector throughout the pandemic. I think that people still face incredible challenges, but I think the response to the pandemic has been one that has been very powerful and inspiring from what I've seen.
So powerful weren't these lessons? I heard connectivity, resiliency, maybe reprioritizing. I think we all can relate to what some of that means. And so thank you for sharing that. What I thought I would do, because of my background as an advocate in the state of Wyoming, I've been a registered lobbyist for 20 years, almost 20 years here in Wyoming. And I've worn different hats during that time. And, but I've always been registered in some way or another, representing an organization or a group before the Wyoming legislature. I don't do federal. Let's just keep that somewhere over here, because I don't, that's a whole nother situation, but really pleased to be a part of what's here in Wyoming. I think, we've heard the saying that Wyoming is one small town with long streets. And I think we all can relate to the connectivity that we have with each other, and how our partnerships really do make us better here in Wyoming. So what I thought I would do is kick us off with some master lessons, if you will, from a longtime advocate. And for those of you, I think that many of you will maybe remember, and maybe some of you don't know who I'm going to be talking about, but I'm going to liken this to a David Letterman top 10. He's a talk show host who used to be big back in the day. I'm not sure when that was. And my corgis are going to bark now because UPS is pulling up. So I apologize that I didn't put them outside. So it's a top 10 list, but I've got two ways. I'm going to tell you the top 10 things to do if you're an advocate or wanting to advocate. And this is meant for average people just like you. This isn't for people like me. And then I'm going to give you the top 10 things not to do. And here's the barking. I'm so sorry. Michael, you're probably ready to kill me here. I'm very sorry for that. The top 10 things not to do are maybe more important or as important as the top things to do. So with that, I am going to share my screen, and just bear with me because this is the part where I'm challenged with technology. But here we are, the top 10 things to remember about advocacy. I'm going to make this bigger. Okay, can you all see my screen? Am I successful with that? Okay, I see some heads shaking. So the first thing to remember is just never assume, and this will, I say legislator here, but just keep in mind, this could be city council person, this could be community county commissioner, this could be legislator, this could be governor, whoever it is that you're talking to, just remember they hear from so many different people. And not that you're not important, but they are busy people. That is really the assumption that's made here. So just don't assume that they might remember or they know everything about your organization, or frankly, you, if you don't know them. And maybe you've met them 5 times, just please keep in mind, kind of extend that grace that they have so many constituents, and they probably know they met you if they don't remember, but maybe they don't remember where because they meet so many people. So I just always say, just don't assume anything. Don't assume that they might remember you or know anything about your organization. Not saying anything bad, just saying, let's just give everyone the grace. Because I will tell you, I've met and deal with some legislators repeatedly, and sometimes it's just out of context, it's quick, whatever it is, they'll say, oh, it's glad to meet you. I'm like, I've met you 10 times. But you have to just extend that grace that, I forget sometimes where I've met someone. So I think it's good to remember that. Number 2 is never have the first meeting that you have with a policymaker or a legislator be the meeting where you need something, where you're saying, please, we need $10 million, whatever it is. We need you to consider this legislation. You can build up to that, but it's usually maybe not the best way to make that introduction. This is about building relationships. So hopefully by the time you do make an ask, you've got that relationship already, at least, in the works. Always remember about advocacy is just to know who are the key leaders, who are the people that you're really going to need to access, where are the decisions made. And in our Wyoming legislature, if it's tied to money, it's our appropriations chairman, maybe another committee chairman, folks in leadership, folks who are making the decisions about how the process works. That's who you identify. Maybe it's the chairman of the county commission, something like that. It's just good to know how the process works and who makes those decisions. Number 4 is to identify the best advocates. And that's just, thinking about your organization, who is a shaker and a mover, or who's just someone who's really outgoing and really good at talking to people. Sometimes those are the folks that you want to really employ. Maybe someone who's really good understanding the intricate details of the numbers. You just really have to think about who has the best skills to fit the needs of what you're advocating for. And then number 5 kind of goes along with that. Whenever possible, have as much data and specific examples. I have on here from your college, maybe it's from your organization, maybe it's from your local arts agency, maybe it's from your city or town. It kind of depends on whatever the issue is that you're working on. Number 6 is to just, once you create your message, be consistent, stay on message, and just don't over deliver. Don't give them too much information. Think about when you receive data on something, do you like to receive something, 1 pager, maybe front and back, or do you like to receive 20 pages that you'll probably never get through? Probably it's the former, right? So make a consistent message, keep it short, etc. Number 7 would be consider your opposition. Always know the other side of the story, always. A policymaker will often say, well, what's the flip side, or what's the opposition going to say? And you should be able to answer that question. Number 8 is why should they care? And this is going back to that relationship building. Relate it to them, relate it to your community, relate it to why it matters to them and who the people that they represent, their district. And then number 9 is thanking your legislator. Always thank them. Thank them for your time, thank them for taking your message, etc. Now, the next slide is the mishaps, which you might think that some of them might be funny, but they're not meant to be, because I can tell you all of these things I've seen happen. And I'll go through these quickly because I don't want to do all the talking. I want David and Becca to do some more talking. So the mishaps would be number 1, only meeting with individuals who share your political views. You know, why would that be a mishap? Because there are other opportunities for people to weigh in. And sometimes you can build advocates who you didn't know could be there, or maybe they have a different reason for approaching it. Number 2 would be underestimating the value of meeting with a legislator or a policymaker on their turf. Don't underestimate that. Sometimes, you know, they're always hustling to make meetings. Maybe you come to their favorite coffee shop rather than coming to your office, or in a statewide circumstance, Cheyenne. Maybe you go meet them in Worland or whatever that looks like. That speaks volumes. And sometimes that's a kind of a nice breath of fresh air for a policymaker. Number 3 ties back to what I mentioned in the other slide, was waiting until action is needed before you make that initial contact. Build your relationships. Take the time to get to know folks as people. That's my biggest advice to anyone who's in this advocacy business, is get to know the fact that Michael Lang has 2 kids who are in grade school and he plays the bass. You know, get to know those things about people, because that's how you connect one-to-one, and you can say, where have you been playing lately? I would love to hear your latest concert. So those are things that connect us as people. And ultimately, that's what we all have in common with each other, is that we're people. Number 4 kind of builds on what I said earlier, is just don't assume that it only takes one visit. These people are busy. Please just remember that it's a process. Usually it's wise to, kind of space it out a little bit and build up to the time when you do have a specific ask. Again, expecting the member to know the details about your organization. Just remember that, maybe they know about your local arts agency, but maybe they can't remember how big you are, or, whatever the details are. Give them some grace again. This seems so simple, and so kind of like, why are you mentioning this, Erin? You would be surprised how many people still think it's fine to just whip out their phones, and I am holding my phone right here up to the screen, and they are not present because they're texting, they're taking another, whatever it is. What if you're in a meeting with more than maybe one member and someone else is talking? That is not an invitation for you to get on your phone. What that says is that you're not interested in giving them your full attention. So why should they give you theirs? I can't stress that enough. It happens all the time. Number 7 is just try not to appear to be too partisan. I mean, honestly, the people that I work with, most of them probably don't know my affiliation, or how my clients, fall in terms of the spectrum of party affiliation. And I think that's usually for the best. Really know the rules about bringing gifts to the members, buying coffee, where the limits are. It's always important to understand that most states do have regulations in terms of what you can give a policymaker, a legislator particularly. Information is free. You can always give them information. One thing that the last 2 are probably the biggest, and maybe they should have been, I should have really counted down like David Letterman and said, this should be number 2 and then number 1. So I didn't do it justice. But holding a grudge when you don't get the response that you would like. that just doesn't work, especially in Wyoming. And maybe times are changing a little bit more, and I will say that they are, but you do have to get past it, because you're going to have to work with these people on another issue. And maybe you'll have, different partners on that issue when on the issue before that you weren't necessarily on the same page. That's kind of how things work around here. So, please just get over yourself and make sure that you're able to present your best foot moving forward. And then the last one has to do with, your integrity is stretching the truth or making up the answers. Maybe even unintentionally just say, I don't know, and I will find out and I will get back with you. Don't try and make it up. Don't try and fake it till you make it. It's not worth it. So those are some of my pieces of advice that I've seen all of them work. I've seen all of them I've seen them be embarrassing situations for some people. And that's really sad when that happens. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to allow David and Becca to tell us a little bit about, if we're talking about local advocacy here in Wyoming. And I know, David, you've got a great angle on this too, with different states' perspectives. Tell us, how do you define local advocacy and what does that look like for you? And I'll just kind of let you guys, David, I'll let you go first on this one. Tell us a little bit more about what that means to you.
All right, there are many things that I could say, but I'll start here. For me, local advocacy is really the fundamental building block of our democracy in a lot of ways. I do feel that at the local level, in many ways, decisions are made that have an impact on our daily lives and on the daily lives of people in our community in pretty tangible ways, like very, very tangible ways. And so it's a great starting point for advocates to begin to engage. So having said that, I'd say one thing is that part of that is exercising your rights. We have the right to vote. And that's one key way of exercising your rights. And to be an effective voter, you really do need to know the issues. You need to know something about your elected officials and those who are running for office. You also likely need to be aware of other community leaders whom you trust, who sometimes can shape your opinion and shape the opinion of others in the community about particular issues that might influence how you vote. I think all of that is vitally important. And I do think having as many people participate in our democratic processes as possible improves our ability to shape policies that benefit everyone. So I think it's pretty essential. And again, it starts at the local level. So many of the decisions made at the local level affect all of us in very, very practical ways. Beyond that, I'd say that it's at the local level is an opportunity where you can consider becoming involved with advocacy groups and action groups. There are a lot of different issues that many of us care about, and there are all these national organizations that call us and send letters to us and ask us to donate and all of those things. One of the most effective ways that I think that you can be involved in issues you care about is to be involved in them on the local level, because again, those decisions are going to be eminently practical to your daily life and the daily life of community members. So whatever those sets of issues are that are important to you, I'd find a way to engage in those issues and with groups working on those issues at the local level, including obviously arts and culture.
Such great advice. I love that. And how appropriate, because today is November 2nd. And if you haven't gone to the polls, please do that. I haven't yet, and I'm planning to do that after I'm done with this. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that, because that is our first and primary exercise right there, is to extend our voice, right? So I'm so glad that you mentioned that. And partnerships, really looking to who you can augment your voice, and how do you bring in expertise from others as well. So really great advice, David. Thank you for that. Becca, what does local advocacy mean to you?
So at the Wyoming Women's Foundation, I've done some state level advocacy, like Erin, although on a kind of a more newbie level. And then I've also, been part of some local advocacy efforts. And so I would say that in some ways, the local advocacy is like a smaller scale, a tighter group, but similar. You're trying to influence your community to be something that you'd like, a place where you'd like to live, right? And so it's engaging about an issue or a cause right there in your home. And I think in some ways it can be simpler or easier because you have easier access to your local decision makers than you do to statewide decision makers, minus Zoom, of course, but just in-person meetings and stuff, you can access them a little bit more easily. But then in some ways too, you may have a lot of existing relationships that make it more complicated or easier to be engaging with those local folks that you might know in different contexts. And so I would just say that, the local advocacy is part of the whole. Kind of starting on the local level is a great way to become an advocate. If you haven't tried it before, you can practice. And then you may find that that's where you want to stay, or you may decide that you might want to take your skills to a higher level, either at the state or national level. But it's good practice and kind of I really like the grassroots image that we talk about so often, because it's about everybody in your community having a voice and being able to talk to those decision makers about what they want their community to look like.
Thank you for that. Really drilling it home and bringing it to the local level, which is so important. And I will tell you, policymakers, they hear from people like me all the time. That's fine. I'm paid to do that. It matters most when they hear from you. That's when they get to say, I've heard from my constituents. This is really important for my community. That voice matters more than any other voice, which I think is really the beauty of this entire process. So thank you for bringing those points to light for us, Becca. I'm going to allow you each now, or I'm going to ask you to spend a little bit more time, and I'm going to ask you a two-part question. Number one, what do you spend most of your time doing? And then with that, because I have a feeling that will tie into the second part of the question, or maybe it's just the second question, is tell us about a project that you are just really excited about, and whether it's one that you've worked on, maybe one that you've seen in another experience, another state, another role, but that can really be a good learning experience for everyone here today. So what do you spend most of your time working on? And then what's just a really cool project? And obviously I would assume it might be in this arts and culture space, but I think that's a pretty wide net that we have here in Wyoming and how that could apply to us. So I'll let you go ahead and run with that. So whoever would like to go first, I'll let you two decide.
Okay, thanks, David. I can start, sure. So my role as the director of the Women's Foundation isn't 100% advocacy, but that's certainly part of what I do. And so I'll talk about what type of advocacy we're doing when that's the hat that I'm wearing. So our mission at the Women's Foundation is to help women achieve economic self-sufficiency. And so you're right, it's a little bit outside of the arts and culture focus. And that's partly because I'm standing in for Micah today. And so it's a little bit broader at the Community Foundation in general. So, but some of the issues that we're working on right now, I think do apply to this sort of the life of artists in the state. And one of them that we've taken an interest in is Medicaid expansion. And that's because we want to make sure that people in our communities are really getting the healthcare that they need. And I know that sometimes when you're working for yourself, you may not have access to, say, employer-sponsored healthcare or something. So some of you may be interested in that issue. But one of the things that's been really great for us being involved in that is that we have been part of a coalition, and it's called Healthy Wyoming. And we got involved with it. Micah and I got involved with it primarily over Zoom. And so this is one instance where connecting over Zoom has been really effective. And I think we've both done a lot of networking with other organizations that are that have similar or parallel missions or goals to help people in Wyoming access healthcare. And so that's, I think it's a state issue for sure, but there's been a lot of local grassroots efforts along with it. And so we are part of an organization or sort of this coalition that is really trying to reach out to every community and create smaller groups that can all work together to advocate for a common cause. And so we have people around the state that we meet with pretty often who are engaging with the folks in their own towns and cities across Wyoming and really engaging those networks that they already have, and then kind of identifying legislators in their and local decision makers in their communities who are interested in this topic or who might not know enough about it. And so there's a lot of education that goes along with it. And it's been a really just a great community project for us to get to know people around the state and to find out what their needs are and how we can help with that. So I would say that's kind of one of the projects that we've engaged with the most in terms of advocacy at the Women's Foundation. We also just simply follow some of the issues that are going on that impact women's economic self-sufficiency. And so we collect the information and we disseminate it to everyone who's on our email list, and we kind of highlight the things that are most relevant to them so that they don't have to go through read as much and try to decipher everything for themselves. And so we're trying to kind of boil that down so that it's a quicker read, it's a little bit more accessible to them. And then sometimes suggesting, if this change is made, it will have this outcome for our constituency. And if the change is not made, it will have this other outcome. And so we don't necessarily tell people to do a certain thing, but just let them know that the issue is being considered by their policymakers and that they should weigh in on it if that's important to them. So those are a couple of things that we're doing. We're also just trying to build our group of grassroots advocates, and we have a group called the Power Advocates. And so that's kind of more of a little membership group that we're growing. And it's a little bit different than the regular or sort of the general supporters that we have for our organization. And so that's been something that's been in the works for about the last year and a half. And we're just hoping to get more engagement with that and, be able to connect a little bit better with folks across the state and connect them to their own communities. So that's been really good for us. It's been a big step for us to take because it was in the past, we'd done a little bit more passive engagement with folks and just depended on them to engage and kind of educate themselves, but we're trying to be a little bit more proactive to really facilitate them to take the actions that are important to them in their communities. So those are kind of the things that we've worked on the most recently. And I think I'll stop there and let David answer.
All right, thanks, Becca. All great points. And I think there's some great tie-ins from what you shared and what I'll share. So at WestF, I think I work on probably about 5 different portfolios, but one of them is advocacy. And in the advocacy work, that work is split between national coalitions, federal advocacy, and state level advocacy and lobbying. So with national coalitions, one of the ones we're involved in is called the Cultural Advocacy Group. It's a network of largely national arts organizations that shape the federal policy agenda for arts and culture in America. So it's a group of us. We have regular calls and meetings and shape policy recommendations for the White House, members of Congress, A number of the people who sit on that group are lobbyists or government affairs staff for national organizations. Many of them are based in Washington, so have relationships on the Hill and relationships in the White House, and leverage those relationships in the interests of the arts and culture sector. So that's one of the things that we do on the federal level. And indeed, we have, been more recently, one of the chief authors of a lot of the policy recommendations that have been released recently, and have taken up more of a leadership role in that group. So that's a great opportunity. On the federal level, we also endorse new pieces of legislation. There are a number of congressional offices that reach out to us and ask us to endorse legislation that's important to the arts and culture sector. An example of which is Save Our Stages, which led to the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. We also provide written testimony to congressional committees and support federal appropriations for cultural agencies, and things like that. We also worked with the transition team from the transition from the former administration to the current administration in the White House. So that gives a bit of a picture of what we do on that federal front. We also engage with a network called the Western Arts Advocacy Network, which is a group of state arts advocacy organizations like the Wyoming Arts Alliance. And we invite them to engage with their congressional delegations and partner with them in shaping their strategies for legislative sessions on the state level. On the state level, we also fund advocacy groups to work with professional lobbyists like Aaron. Sometimes we work with and fund those lobbyists directly ourselves. We also support advocacy training and capacity building in the 13 states in our region, of which Wyoming is one. We also support advocacy days and summits at the state level. And so what I'd say in terms of a project that we're very proud of, the Western Arts Advocacy Network, which is a network of advocates across the 13 states in our region, mostly state arts advocacy organizations, but also lobbyists, sometimes executive directors of state arts agencies participate on that group as well. An example of a state arts agency is, for example, the Wyoming Arts Council. They sit on that group. That was a new group that we organized and brought into being very early in the pandemic. It's something that we had thought about doing as an organization for some time, and something that we planned for the future. But with the onset of the pandemic, we knew that conditions in the field were worsening rapidly and there was a need to respond quickly. And so we very quickly established this group. I think it was actually in March 2020, we first convened the group, and then shortly thereafter supported them to elect their first co-chairs so that the network would be, self-organized with support from WestAF. One of the early things that we did was get the members of that group to commit to pursuing state relief funding for the arts and culture field in each of their states. And they agreed to do so. And since the beginning of the pandemic to now, collectively, they have, advocated in support of relief funds at the state level, which have garnered around $830 million of investment in the arts and culture sector across the region, including some exceptionally large packages in some states, the largest of which is a $600 million package for arts and culture in that state. So it's incredible what they were collectively able to achieve. We supported them throughout the process in exchanging knowledge with one another about what strategies were working, what entry points were working, whether it was engaging the governor, engaging legislators, what they were asking for the money to be used for, and what were the effective arguments that were being made, how they organized their campaigns and all the rest of it. And that sharing of knowledge amongst one another and as a network really facilitated the result that they were able to achieve, which we're very proud of.
Such great examples. One, a statewide organization, and in the interest of full disclosure, I have to tell everyone I am a board member for the Community Foundation. And so I kind of have another viewpoint where I can echo what you heard from Becca coming in. the community, the relationships, the outreach across the state that the Community Foundation does, executes, whatever the right words are. It's really so impressive. And so you heard a little bit from Becca on kind of the mechanics of how that works. I really loved your idea about this new kind of go-to group. It's not necessarily your board members, it's not your regular donors, it's maybe a different voice. Is that kind of how what that group looks like for you?
I think, yeah, it's just like kind of networking, it's it allows us to work with other folks around the state. It gives us kind of a common cause to connect over, but it's also just been really great during the pandemic because people are not traveling as much even now still. And when you are working with a statewide organization, travel takes so much time that to be able to take an hour out of your day and have a Zoom meeting with people across the state, it really adds a lot of efficiency. And it's been interesting to just connect with people for the first time that way and then get to know them over Zoom for several months before even meeting them in person. But it's really possible. And so I think that's something that I would recommend. I don't know. It seems like everyone's embracing Zoom now, so it's not a big deal, but everyone also seems to be sick of Zoom. But it really, I think it has a place to stay for sure. And I also wanted to add, if you don't mind, that Erin, of course, the Wyoming Community Foundation, I think everyone on this call probably knows, also provides funding to nonprofits. And like David, advocacy is an area that we can fund. And so I know that probably some of you work for organizations or with organizations that receive grants from the Wyoming Community Foundation already, but maybe you haven't thought about applying for a grant in the advocacy realm. So that's something that we consider just as much as another type of grant. And there's a lot of different funds that make grants at the Community Foundation. So we have 2 competitive cycles each year in June and December. And, just consider that if that's something that you need, that you need and you'd like to pursue.
That's a great point, Becca, and thank you for bringing that up. So that's the beauty of this panel right now, is just getting more information. Oh, I didn't know we could do that. I didn't know that was available to me. So thank you for bringing that up. David, how cool. I'm a little jealous of whatever state got $600 million. Of course, our scale is a lot less than that here in Wyoming, but how powerful to have an organization like WESTAF and your Western partnerships to really build off of those relationships and how things are working in another state. A follow-up question that I was going to ask you then was, we had our CARES Act dollars, and a lot of that was recovery and whatnot, but now we do have ARPA money, which is another federal stimulus. Timeframes are different. We have several years to do this. Many states are looking for maybe new and creative opportunities to utilize those sorts of funds. I wondered if you had a neat example where you could share of something where another state is looking, kind of out of the box to utilize some dollars like that. I didn't give you that one beforehand, so I'm sorry for the surprise question.
Not at all. This is something that we've been working on a great deal, and is related to what I mentioned about the relief packages. So one thing that I'll start with is just, given what you said, this is an important moment for people to have ideas and proposals and asks ready, because there is still a lot of federal money flowing through the system, and the money has to be utilized. And indeed, a lot of different government agencies and a lot of different constituencies and sectors, in a certain sense, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but are competing for those resources. And elected officials and authorizers are looking for ideas. And so it is the case that this is an environment in which some of those government agencies are approached to say, if we were to give you X number of dollars, what would you do with it? And people sometimes have to turn those ideas around pretty rapidly. So I think that this is a time, and we've indeed been encouraging constituents across our 13 states, and sometimes even at the local level in those states, to really begin to think about concrete asks. It's one thing to say the arts should get $50 million more of investment, but to what end, for what, to serve whom, to improve communities in Wyoming, how, like those are the things. And even like specific programs, strategies, things that people have wished that they could do for years and have never been able to do because the resources have not been there, or how to address current challenges and problems facing individual artists, arts and cultural organizations, communities across the state. This is the moment for that. So that's what I will start with. Then what I'll say is an example of this, I might be able to briefly give two. One is in Colorado, which we've been pretty extensively involved in. And that is one such case where the governor was looking for ideas about how to spend some of these federal dollars and called upon the various state arts agencies to come up with a concept. And the leader of the state arts agency came up with a concept, discussed it with a range of folks, including West staff, and presented an idea to the governor, which resonated. It was to essentially invest in real estate development projects that support the creative industries across the state, especially through the cultural districts, and that would reach rural and remote communities and under-resourced communities in the state. And the governor really liked the idea, as well as a number of the other leaders of other state agencies. And it rose to the top of the pile in terms of creative new strategies. The governor, because of business background and everything like that, is knowledgeable about real estate deals and things like that. And the agency traveled with him on some visits to creative districts to expose him to some of the projects that could potentially be in the pipeline for this new program. And he immediately saw what the challenges and gaps were, and so was very sold on the idea. The outcome of that is that there's now a $65 million new grant program in Colorado to fund these initiatives. A community revitalization grant program led by Colorado Creative Industries, which is the state arts agency here. And advocates were instrumental in the success of that as well, because it's one thing to have the assent of the governor and that proposal to be there. Legislation had to happen, so legislators had to be engaged. And we did organize a campaign. We definitely focused a lot on having developers, chambers of commerce, the private sector really advocate on behalf of this initiative and the value of it, but as well as, arts advocates of all kinds as part of that as well. And it was successful. It passed and the program has been created. So that's one. And then I will spill the beans. California, which I'm sure many people could have imagined that I would have said that, is the state that had the $600 million package, which included any number of different initiatives. Some of those, as they move forward, will in all likelihood be funded in part by ARPA dollars, and CARES dollars have been brought into that. And the state did have a budget surplus in the end, which is supporting some of those efforts as well. So those are two different examples. The Colorado example, I think, is great and illustrative of what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. How fun, and congratulations. It's really fun to hear a story like that. And for those of you who are listening in on this, I know Michael's popping up, which means we're getting ready for questions, but I thought I would add, Wyoming is in a unique spot. You all know we live and work in Wyoming. We are subject to the ebbs and flows of what happens in our extractive industries. Our fiscal profile is looking healthier than it has in the last several years. And add that with the federal dollars that are coming down the pike, we have a lot of opportunity here in Wyoming as well. So I know our agencies have been asked the questions. We're waiting. The governor will release his budget on November 15th. It'll go through the legislative process. But we might see some things that could be really exciting and beneficial. So I'm excited to see what that might look like. Of course, we all have to be wise and recognize that a lot of this is one-time dollars as well. But thank you for giving those examples. I think, Michael, I'm going to let you handle the questions. I don't know how they're coming in, if people are just popping up, or if they're
Erin,
writing them.
you bet. I'm happy to jump in with questions, and I see a couple hands. I would love to kick off a question for you as we start questions. And I think, you know, one of the things we've been hearing a lot about is how can we help people feel comfortable advocating on the local level? Sometimes people hear the word advocacy or think of like lobbying and think that's for other people. That's not necessarily for me. So I was wondering if maybe, Erin, you could just talk a bit more about, you know, like yes, everyone has this ability to talk to their local, you know, to talk to their local policy leaders, and that is okay, and that's a great way for you to be engaged in the process. So I was wondering if maybe you could just talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, you bet, Michael. That's a great question, and it really kind of goes back to what I said earlier in my top 10 lists is just don't be afraid to use your city councilmen, county commissioners like to hear from average people. I would say more than, like I said, people who are paid to do it, who know the game. So I understand there's probably a little bit of, you know, intimidation involved with maybe speaking in front of a committee. You don't have to do it like that all the time. You can just pick up the phone and call your elected official. You can send them an email and just say, hey, here's my story. Here's an issue that I wanted to talk to you about. They are going to be so happy to hear from their constituents. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So it's probably just, you got to kind of extend yourself the grace to get past the nervousness, but just reach out and see how it goes. And especially here in Wyoming, don't be afraid to come and show up at a meeting. Because legislators will always let members of the public speak in most cases before anybody else. So it's really a value that we hold here in Wyoming that is so important. Hearing from the people matters so much. Thank
you so much, Erin. That's a great point, I think, for everyone to take home for sure. Next, I would kick it to Bruce Richardson, has his hand up in the reactions bar for any folks that have questions. There's a little hand you can raise. So Dr. Bruce Richardson, I'd kick it to you next.
Thanks, Mike. And I speak on behalf of the Wyoming Arts Alliance, and advocacy is fun. This is an enjoyable way of life. It's something you can do every minute with every person. And one way you can join with the other advocates is to join our organization. We need a lot of people. And when we do legislative work, Erin does some of the work from us, but she alerts us and we make individual contacts, and the things happen, you know, because of particular people and no particular legislators. If you want to be part of the game, join the club. And I gotta thank the Western States Arts Federation for so much support that funds our work that's going on, and got to thank the Community Foundation that's provided support for our community arts development programs, and got to thank the Arts Council for supporting our different initiatives here. It's a big deal. So thank you for letting me put in a commercial.
Bruce, thank you so much. I think you make a really great point that it's the collective piece, right? So the lobbyists really understanding what's happening at the state legislature, but being able to share that to people who can reach out to their local officials is definitely a big piece of that. So I thank you for that piece. I just put a link into the chat box about the Wyoming Arts Alliance as well for anyone who'd like to check that out. And next, I'd love to kick it over to William Bowling. William, if you'd unmute, we'd love to have a question from you.
Yeah, hi, thank you guys for such a lovely panel today. I guess this is steered, towards Erin as a lobbyist, but David and Becca, if you have some insights as well, I'd love to hear it. I'm thinking about, a robust cultural economy holistically, and how inextricably linked, a vibrant art sector is to education sectors and funding and education, or expanded Medicare, or things like that, and the actual health of a community of people. And so I'm wondering, as a lobbyist, how you approach or think about also advocating and lobbying on behalf of other issues that directly affect cultural economy stuff, or if you work in conjunction or in collaboration with other advocates in that regard.
William, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. You know, something that we've been talking about in the arts and culture community for several years now is exactly that. How do we link up and really express the value and show policymakers how so interconnected all of this is, from education to economic development, to recruiting businesses to come here, to building livable communities. You know, what do Wyoming people want, and what keeps them here? What's going to bring other people here? And so those conversations have really been, I think, starting to weave together maybe more than they used to, because you know, in Wyoming we talk so much about oil and gas and coal, and understandably so, that drives our bottom line. It's our fiscal security net. But we're seeing a shift in our culture, I believe, and especially in this new working environment that we have. People can move to Wyoming and work for someone somewhere else, or for themselves. And what do they want when they come here? They want our outdoors, they want the amenities, they want arts and culture, they want great education, they want space to do the things that they want to do. So I think a lot of that, it's incumbent upon everyone here, anyone who is in a position of continuing conversations, but not just out in public, but one-on-one, and reminding those who are in agencies, administrations, decision-making places, that these are things that we as people really want to see. And I'll just kind of quickly touch on the fact that Governor Meade did have a process called the Endow process, where we did try and kind of link all of these things up together. Governor Gordon, I think, is he didn't continue with that word endow in that process, but I think he's trying to figure out how do we link all of this stuff together, and those are things that we're reminded of continually when we talk about economic development. It's not just about jobs, it's about livable communities. And so we in the arts and culture sector, we need to continue that message and just make sure that we build the relationships and it just doesn't kind of fade away or get lost. So I hope that helps a little bit to answer your question.
Erin, thank you. Thank you so much on that last answer. And that really brings us to the end of our session, recognizing our next session is about to kick off. So I just want to take a minute and thank Erin so much for her top 10, both up and down, and for helping moderate our section with David Holland and Becca Smith. Thank you all so much for joining us. And we hope you will all stick around for our next session, which will be an image exchange for Wyoming visual artists to share work from their portfolio and get feedback from other visual artists, and also time for conversations amongst artists working in the visual field. We recognize that Zoom is not the best way for us to go about convening, but it is the way we have right now, and we are excited to have you all with us in the virtual space. So Erin, David, and Becca, thank you again so much, and we look forward to more advice on advocacy as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.